The crash came without warning, like a thunderbolt from the heavens. Captain Aaron Voss had only a few seconds to pull the emergency lever before his small scout ship tore through the planet's atmosphere, fire wrapping around the hull. The alarms screamed, the controls froze, and the world outside became a blur of red and gold. When he finally hit the ground, everything went dark. When Aaron opened his eyes, there was silence. The ship was half buried in the soil, twisted metal and burning wires marking his grave if he didn't act fast. His head throbbed and blood trickled from a cut near his eye. He pushed himself up, calling out, "This is Captain Voss, stranded on unknown planet. Anyone reading?" But the radio only gave a hollow crackle. No response. He stepped out into a world that felt alive and ancient. Giant trees rose into the clouds, their bark glowing faintly blue. The air shimmered with strange dust, and faint animal cries echoed in the distance. The planet's twin moons hung above, pale and haunting. Aaron checked his scanner. Oxygen was breathable, radiation low, but life signs were everywhere. Moving, watching. He gathered what supplies he could. Water pack, rations, flare gun, and climbed to a nearby ridge. From there he saw nothing human, nothing made by hands like his, only the endless jungle stretching in every direction, breathing like a living thing. The realization hit him hard. He was alone. For 3 days he wandered near the crash site, trying to fix the comms, searching for metal fragments to boost the signal. He spoke to himself to stay sane, sometimes laughing at the absurdity of it all. The planet was beautiful, yes, but beauty could be deadly. His food was almost gone, and night brought sounds that didn't belong in any zoological database. On the 4th night, as darkness swallowed the forest, Aaron sat beside a cold patch of dirt, staring at his last flare. If no one saw him soon, he would die here, unknown, forgotten. The thought burned worse than hunger. He looked at the broken panels and wires scattered around and whispered, "If light can't reach me, I'll make my own." He started collecting wood, dry and strange-smelling. The fragments of his ship still sparked when struck. He built a small pile and struck the metal together until smoke curled upward. His arms ached, but he didn't stop. Then, finally, the spark caught. Flames burst alive, orange and wild against the dark. For the first time in days, he felt warmth, hope, life. The light danced on his face, and he almost smiled. "There," he muttered. "Now they'll see me." But far beyond the trees, something else saw the fire first. A pair of eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Then another pair, and another. Hidden shapes moved silently between the trees. They were tall, graceful, but their movements were animal, predatory. The forest that had been silent now seemed to breathe around him, the crackle of leaves turning into whispers. Aaron felt it, the feeling of being watched. His instincts screamed danger. He gripped a metal rod and stood beside the fire, eyes darting into the shadows. The whispers stopped. Only the wind moved. He waited. Minutes passed. Nothing came. Slowly, he sat again, trying to calm himself. "Imagination," he whispered. "Just nerves." But as he turned back to the fire, he froze. There were marks in the dirt near the edge of the light. Long, slender footprints, too large to be from any known animal and shaped almost like hands. He followed them with his eyes until they vanished into the darkness. A sound followed, a soft melodic hum, rising and falling like a song. It was close, too close. He grabbed his makeshift weapon and stepped back, heart racing. The shadows shifted again and something metallic flashed for an instant, then disappeared. Aaron aimed his flare gun into the trees. "Show yourself," he shouted, voice shaking. Silence answered him, and then something hit the ground near his feet. A spear, long and sharp, humming faintly with blue energy. Its tip was buried deep in the dirt, only inches from his boot. Aaron looked up, his pulse pounding. But whoever or whatever had thrown it was gone. The forest stood still again, silent and ancient. The flames of his signal fire crackled louder than before, painting the trees in flickering gold. He stared at the spear for a long moment, the weight of realization sinking in. His signal fire had worked. Yes. But he wasn't sure who had seen it, and deep in the shadows, unseen eyes watched him, whispering in their alien tongue, "The stranger of flame, he has come." The jungle slept, but Aaron could not. The fire had burned low to a soft orange glow, its crackle the only sound in the heavy air. The alien spear still stood buried in the dirt beside him, faintly humming as if alive. He had tried to pull it out earlier, but the metal was warm and pulsed like it had a heartbeat of its own. It was a warning, he thought, a message written without words. By morning, the forest was quiet again. The mist hung low, drifting through glowing trees that whispered in the wind. Aaron rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the tracks left near his camp, the same long hand-like prints. He knelt down and traced one with his finger, realizing something. Whatever made them walked upright. It wasn't an animal, it was intelligent. He followed the prints for a short distance but stopped when he heard a strange clicking sound echoing through the woods. It was rhythmic like communication. He backed away slowly, feeling a chill crawl down his spine, then returned to camp and began building a second fire, larger and brighter. If they were watching, he wanted them to see that he was not afraid. Hours passed. He gathered fruits that looked safe, drank from the clear stream nearby, and cleaned the wounds on his arm. He spoke to himself again, muttering little things to keep his mind steady. Stay calm, Voss. You're trained for isolation. You've survived worse. But deep inside, he knew he had never faced anything like this. When night came again, the forest changed. The air felt thicker. The wind carried faint whispers that sounded almost human. The firelight pushed the darkness away, but the shadows around him seemed to breathe. Then he saw something, barely a shape at first. A figure, tall and slender, standing beyond the fire's edge, still as stone. Aaron froze. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, only watched. He could feel the weight of its gaze like a physical touch. Then as his eyes adjusted, he saw more shapes behind it. 3, maybe 4, moving silently between the trees. They were surrounding him. He slowly reached for his flare gun, but before he could aim, a low voice echoed from the darkness, melodic yet commanding. He couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. It was a warning. A second later, something flew through the air and landed beside him. He flinched back, realizing it was a bundle of fruit and leaves tied together with vine. Aaron stared at it in confusion. Food, a gift, or bait. His hand trembled as he reached out, then stopped. The shadows shifted again, and one of the tall figures stepped closer, just enough for the firelight to reveal a glimmer of silver skin. It wasn't armor, it was her. The alien's body shimmered softly, almost blending with the forest light. Her face was sharp but graceful, with markings that glowed faintly across her cheeks. Her eyes were bright gold, watching him with both caution and curiosity. She said something again, softer this time, as if testing his reaction. Aaron lowered his weapon slowly. I don't understand you, he said gently, keeping his voice calm. But I'm not your enemy. The alien tilted her head, her expression unreadable. She pointed at the fire, then at him, her golden eyes narrowing. Aaron realized what she meant, the fire. She didn't like it. Maybe it scared her people. Maybe it was forbidden. I need it, he said quietly, pointing upward. Signal, rescue. He mimed, waving to the sky, then pointed at the fire again. She watched his gestures carefully, then made a short, sharp sound, something like laughter or disbelief. Another shadow appeared behind her, this one smaller, more nervous. It hissed something in their strange language, and the first alien raised her hand to silence it. Then both of them turned and vanished back into the trees without a sound, leaving the fruit bundle behind. Aaron waited, barely breathing, eyes fixed on the forest. He didn't know whether to feel safe or hunted. Hours passed before he dared to move. Finally, he picked up the fruit bundle, examining it. The fruits were cool, fresh, clearly placed there just moments before he found them. He hesitated, then took a small bite. It was sweet. Safe enough. As he sat beside the fire, chewing slowly, he thought about what had just happened. Whoever they were intelligent, cautious, and organized. They watched from the shadows, studying him, testing him. Then he noticed something strange. Near the edge of his camp, carved into a rock, was a new symbol, a circle with lines radiating outward like a sun. He hadn't seen it before. Someone had marked it there while he slept. He stood up quickly, scanning the dark. What does it mean? He muttered under his breath. No answer came. Only the wind moved the leaves, carrying faint whispers through the forest. The fire crackled again, and Aaron felt it. The presence. Dozens of unseen eyes were watching from the darkness, silent and patient, and though he couldn't see them, he could almost feel their message in the air. The stranger of flame has been marked. The hunt begins. The morning came slowly, dragging fog across the forest floor like a ghostly curtain. Aaron didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. His mind replayed the strange visit again and again, the golden-eyed alien, the gift of fruit, the symbol carved into stone. It wasn't just a warning, it was a claim. They were watching him, marking him, testing what kind of creature he was. He stood by the remains of the fire, poking the ashes. The jungle was silent again, too silent. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. He felt it, the same pressure in the air as before, that eerie stillness that comes before danger. Aaron reached for his metal rod, his only weapon, and scanned the tree line. A faint shimmer moved among the trees. Then another. The air itself seemed to bend around the shapes as if light refused to touch them. Aaron squinted. They were camouflaged using some kind of technology, or maybe it was biological. Whatever it was perfect. The shimmering stopped, and 3 tall figures emerged from the forest, stepping into the clearing one by one. His heart hammered. They were the same as before, but now he could see them clearly. Their skin was smooth and reflective, silver with faint hues of violet when sunlight hit. Their bodies were built for agility, lean and powerful, every muscle moving like a dancer's. They wore armor made of bones and glowing crystals, and each carried a spear that hummed softly, like the one thrown near him. The one in front was taller, her white hair braided with metal rings that jingled as she moved. Her eyes, sharp, golden, full of command, locked onto his. She was their leader. Aaron stepped back, holding his weapon low to show he meant no harm. "Easy," he said quietly. "I don't want trouble." The leader didn't respond. She spoke something in her language, a series of sharp clicks and low tones. The 2 huntresses behind her spread out, flanking him. Their movements were fast, almost too fast for his eyes to follow. He realized instantly, if they wanted him dead, he'd already be gone. The leader gestured toward the dead fire, then pointed at him. Her expression was not anger, it was something deeper. Reverence, maybe, mixed with fear. She said something again, and one of her companions hissed a reply. Aaron shook his head. "I don't understand," he muttered, hands still raised. The leader stepped closer, her spear tapping the ground once. The sound vibrated like a pulse through the air. Then she reached out and pointed at the ashes. Her voice was calm but firm. "Karen." "Tari flame," he caught one word, flame. So that's what this was about. The fire. She thought the fire belonged to her gods. To them, maybe fire was sacred, forbidden, something mortals weren't supposed to touch. Aaron swallowed hard. "No god," he said, shaking his head. "Just survival." He mimed cold and hunger, rubbing his arms, then gestured to the fire again. Warmth. Light. The huntresses exchanged glances, their glowing tattoos flickering faintly as they whispered to each other. The leader tilted her head, watching him as if trying to decide whether he was lying or simply foolish. Then she did something unexpected. She walked past him and knelt beside the ashes. She touched one of the half-burnt logs, her silver fingers tracing the blackened wood. The moment her skin touched the remains, she hissed and pulled back sharply, smoke rising from her hand. The flesh sizzled, healed instantly, but the others gasped. The leader turned her gaze toward Aaron again, eyes full of both fury and awe. She barked a short command, and the 2 others raised their spears. Aaron's pulse spiked. "Wait, don't!" he shouted, backing up slowly. His mind raced. What had he done wrong? Then it hit him. The fire had burned her, but not him. To them, that made him something unnatural, something dangerous. Before he could move, the leader's spear flashed, stopping just an inch from his chest. The energy hum filled his ears, vibrating through his ribs. She leaned close, her voice low, trembling between fear and curiosity. "You, Fireborn," he froze. The word meant nothing to him, but by the way the others looked at her, it meant everything to them. Then, as quickly as they appeared, the huntresses began to retreat. The leader gave a short, sharp whistle, and the others vanished into the trees again, moving like ghosts. Aaron didn't dare chase them. He stood still, breathing heavily, until silence returned. When he finally looked around, he noticed something hanging from a branch near his camp, a strip of cloth made of alien fiber marked with the same sun symbol from before. Only this time there was a second mark inside it, a flame. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a declaration. They didn't just see him as a trespasser now. They saw him as something else entirely. A being touched by fire, a stranger who walked between gods and mortals. Aaron sat slowly, staring at the mark until the light faded around him. The forest, once just a survival ground, had turned into something far greater, far older. He wasn't just lost on an alien world anymore. He had become a part of its legend. The alien jungle shimmered beneath the twin suns as Captain Aaron Voss awoke to the sound of rustling leaves and distant chanting, his muscles stiff from the night before. The strange encounter still echoed in his mind. The huntresses, their leader's burning hand, and the single word she spoke that refused to leave his thoughts. Fireborn. He sat up, blinking against the light. His camp was no longer empty. Around him the trees were marked with symbols, fresh carvings glowing faintly blue, forming a circle around his campfire's ashes. They were closing in on him, shaping his world without touching him, surrounding him with unseen law. Then the air changed, humming softly. The same golden-eyed leader stepped out from the mist, this time with more of her kind behind her. There were at least a dozen huntresses now, all tall, silent, their spears humming with energy. Their movements were fluid and precise, too coordinated to be random. They weren't just hunters, they were soldiers. Aaron rose slowly, hands visible. "I didn't mean to break your rules," he said, even though he knew they didn't understand. "I was only trying to survive." The leader raised her hand, her sharp eyes fixed on him. She spoke in that lyrical, clicking language again, but her tone was colder now. At her signal, two huntresses stepped forward. Before Aaron could react, they grabbed him with inhuman strength. He struggled, but it was useless. Their grip was iron. "Wait, I'm not your enemy," he shouted, but his words disappeared into the thick air. They marched him through the glowing jungle, following a winding path marked by blue moss and ancient stone. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. Trees wider than buildings, roots shaped like stairs, and glowing insects that floated like lanterns. The huntresses never spoke. They moved like shadows, and he followed because he had no choice. Finally, the forest opened into a vast clearing. There, hidden beneath a massive tree that looked older than time, stood their village. A maze of elevated platforms woven into branches, lit by soft crystal fires that burned cold instead of hot. The air was thick with voices chanting low and steady. Aaron's eyes widened. Hundreds of huntresses were gathered there, their silver skin gleaming under the alien suns. When they saw him, they whispered and bowed their heads slightly, not in greeting, but in ritual. Some even knelt. He realized then, they didn't see him as prey anymore. They saw him as part of something sacred. The leader stepped forward and removed her mask. Her face was fierce but beautiful, the markings on her skin glowing softly. She looked at him, then at the glowing fire above their temple, and said in broken English, "You, Fireborn, you broke the law of flame." Aaron's heart stopped. She spoke his language, at least a few words of it. "Law of flame?" he asked carefully, his voice trembling. She nodded. "Flame, gift of gods. No one touch. No one burn. Only chosen." He shook his head, trying to explain. "I didn't know. Where I come from, fire keeps us alive. It's not divine." Her golden eyes narrowed, unreadable. She said something in her language to the others, and they murmured in response. Then she looked back at him and spoke with slow precision. "Trial. You prove truth. Or burn." Aaron's stomach twisted. A trial. He didn't need translation to know what that meant. Before he could respond, the huntresses bound his wrists with a glowing vine that tightened like a living rope. They led him to the center of the village, where a circular pit was carved into the ground, surrounded by carved stones. The villagers gathered, chanting in rhythm. The air buzzed with tension. The leader, Sarala, he heard one of them call her, raised her spear to the sky. "Fireborn must walk flame," she declared. The crowd answered with a roar. Aaron's mind raced. There was no way he could survive walking through a fire pit. Not here, not under alien judgment. But when he looked around at their faces, so full of awe and fear, he understood that this was not just punishment. It was proof. If he failed, he would die as a heretic. If he survived, he would live as something more. They placed him beside the pit. The huntresses poured some kind of shimmering liquid into the trench, and the ground caught fire instantly, burning blue and white. The heat was immense. Aaron's face stung. Sarala stepped close and whispered something soft, almost regretful. "If you truth, flame not hurt." Then she stepped back, leaving him alone. Aaron looked at the blazing pit, heart pounding. He could hear his ship's alarms again, the roar of the crash, the endless silence afterward. He was tired of fear. He took one step forward, then another. The flames rose around him, licking at his clothes. But they didn't burn. They danced, swirling around him like living things. The crowd gasped. Sarala fell to her knees, whispering words he didn't know. Aaron stood tall in the center of the fire, the light wrapping around him like armor. When the flames finally died, he was still standing, untouched. The huntresses bowed their heads. Sarala looked at him with trembling eyes and spoke the words that would change everything. Fireborn, chosen of the flame. In that moment, Aaron realized he had not just survived, he had been reborn. The blue fire had burned out, but the air was still heavy with smoke and silence. Aaron stood in the middle of the stone circle, chest rising and falling slowly, his body untouched, his skin glowing faintly in the strange light. Around him, hundreds of alien eyes stared in stunned awe. None of them spoke. None dared move. The flames that should have consumed him had instead bent around him like they knew his name. The leader, Sarala, approached slowly. Her golden eyes reflected both fear and reverence. She reached out a trembling hand and touched his arm, expecting heat, pain, something divine. But his skin was warm and alive, just human. Still, the crowd saw something different. They whispered, a soft chant spreading through them like a wave. Fireborn. Fireborn. Aaron didn't understand the words, but he could feel their meaning. He had passed their test. He had become part of their story, whether he wanted it or not. Sarala spoke in her melodic voice, mixing her language with his. You walk flame and live. Fire choose you, now. You must breathe smoke, Aaron frowned. Smoke? He repeated, confused. She nodded gravely. Trial of smoke, fire show life. Smoke show truth. You hide, you lie? Smoke find it. He didn't like the sound of that. He'd barely survived the first ritual. How many more tests did they have? But before he could protest, 2 huntresses stepped forward carrying a large bowl made of stone. Inside it burned a thick silvery incense, releasing clouds of shimmering smoke that twisted in the air like living serpents. Sarala gestured toward him. Breathe, she commanded softly. Aaron hesitated. If I don't? Her expression hardened. Then smoke take you another way, he sighed. There was no choice. He stepped forward, inhaling the strange vapor. The air was sweet at first, like flowers and metal, but then it turned heavy. The world began to tilt. The ground vanished. The chanting voices around him stretched into echoes, distant and hollow. Suddenly, he wasn't standing in the village anymore. He was floating in black space, surrounded by burning stars and shadowy figures. His ship appeared in front of him, broken and burning. He saw himself inside, calling for help that never came, then something else. A memory that wasn't his. A young alien child standing near a fire, crying as storm winds raged. A tall figure, much like Sarala, snatched the torch away, throwing it into the mud. The fire died, and the sky screamed with lightning. The people bowed to the dark clouds, whispering prayers. Fire was forbidden, punished, feared, and those who defied the gods, those who dared to touch the sacred flame, were cast into the forest to die. The image shifted again. Aaron saw Sarala as a child, standing in front of the same tree where the trial pit now burned. Her mother's voice whispered, Fire burns truth. Smoke remembers lies. Never touch what the gods claim. Then the vision broke. Aaron gasped and fell to his knees, coughing. The smoke cleared, the chanting faded, and the village returned to focus. Sarala knelt beside him, her expression unreadable. Smoke speak? She asked quietly. Aaron wiped his mouth and nodded weakly. It showed me your past, he said softly. Your people, they fear fire. You think it's punishment, but where I come from, it's hope. It's how we survive the dark. Her golden eyes widened. For the first time, doubt flickered across her face. She glanced at the crowd, then back to him. Hope? She repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. He nodded. Fire gives warmth. Fire gives light. It's not a god, it's a gift. The silence that followed was deep and fragile. The huntresses exchanged uneasy glances. Generations of belief stood between them, yet something in his voice made them hesitate. Sarala stood, her voice carrying over the crowd. The smoke speak truth, she declared. He fear not fire. He lie not. He walked the flame and breathed the smoke. She turned to Aaron again, lowering her head slightly. You, a fireborn, chosen not by gods, but by courage. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathered huntresses. Some knelt again, but others whispered in fear. Not everyone accepted what they saw. To some he was sacred. To others he was dangerous, a heretic wrapped in miracle. That night the village was alive with quiet tension. Fires burned brighter than before, small ones that flickered across platforms. Some of the younger huntresses dared to touch the flames, laughing softly when they didn't burn. Change was beginning, slow but unstoppable. Aaron sat near the temple, exhausted but alert. Sirala approached him silently, sitting beside him. She watched the firelight play across his face. "You change things," she said. "They will not all like this." "I didn't come here to change anything," Aaron replied. "I just wanted to survive." She smiled faintly, her golden eyes softening. "Survive, yes. But now you live in our story." Above them, the twin moons rose over the glowing forest. Somewhere deep in the jungle, a distant horn sounded. A haunting call that made Sirala tense instantly. Aaron looked at her, puzzled. "What is it?" Her expression darkened. "Not all tribes worship fire," she whispered. "Some hunt it." The trial of smoke had ended, but a new kind of war was about to begin. The night cracked open with thunder that shook the great trees. The wind roared through the alien forest, scattering glowing leaves into the air like shards of light. Aaron stood at the edge of Sirala's village, watching the storm roll in over the mountains. Lightning burned the horizon violet and blue, and something inside him twisted with unease. The storm wasn't natural. It moved with purpose, with rhythm, almost as if it were alive. Behind him, the huntresses moved swiftly, tying down rope bridges and sealing their huts with woven leaves. Their faces were sharp with worry. They knew what was coming. Aaron turned to Sirala, who stood near the sacred tree, her golden eyes fixed on the dark clouds. "What is it?" he asked. "Another storm?" She shook her head slowly. "Not storm," she said. "Hunters." Aaron's chest tightened. "Hunters?" "From the sky," she said, her voice low and trembling. "They come for fire, for us, for you." And then he saw them. The clouds split apart as dark ships descended, massive alien vessels with jagged wings and glowing red engines. They screamed through the sky, leaving trails of smoke. The air shimmered under their power. Aaron knew that design, predatory, militarized. These weren't peaceful travelers. They were raiders, scavengers, and they were heavily armed. The first explosion tore through the outer platforms, shattering wooden bridges and sending debris raining down. The huntresses scattered, shouting commands in their native tongue. Spears charged with energy hummed to life, glowing bright blue. Aaron grabbed one of the fallen weapons, a plasma spear, light as carbon fiber, but powerful enough to cut through steel. He turned to Sirala. "Get your people to cover," he yelled. "Now!" But she shook her head fiercely. "We do not run. This our ground." The ships circled like vultures, dropping armored soldiers, beings that looked similar to the huntresses, but darker, their armor blackened, their eyes glowing crimson. They were from a rival tribe, drawn by the stories of the Fireborn. They believed whoever controlled him could control the flame itself. The raiders advanced through the jungle, firing beams of red plasma that scorched the earth. The huntresses returned fire with energy-tipped arrows, their movements quick and deadly, but they were outnumbered. Aaron sprinted to a fallen log and took cover. The spear in his hand vibrated, responding to his touch. When he swung it, it emitted a trail of heat like burning air. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see what you can do." He leapt from cover, spinning the weapon in a tight arc. The spear released a burst of energy that sent two raiders flying backward. The other huntresses stared in shock before joining him, following his lead. They fought side by side, blades and firelight flashing through the storm. Sirala moved like lightning, her white braid slicing through the rain as she cut down an enemy commander. She met Aaron's eyes through the chaos and nodded once. Trust, forged in battle. The storm grew worse, the rain mixing with smoke. A bolt of plasma hit the sacred tree, setting it ablaze. The blue fire burned upward, roaring into the clouds. Aaron turned toward it, realizing something, the beacon. The flames were massive, visible for miles. He remembered the emergency signal on his suit, the one that had been too weak to reach orbit. But now, with the fire's ionized energy, the signal could bounce. His heart raced. He pressed his wristpad and reactivated his distress beacon. "Come on," he whispered. "See me. Someone, see me." Another explosion rocked the ground. Sarala stumbled, and a raider aimed at her from above. Without thinking, Aaron dove forward, tackling her out of the way. The plasma bolt grazed his shoulder, searing pain through his arm. He gritted his teeth and thrust his spear upward, impaling the raider midair. The enemy screamed and fell into the fire. Sarala stared at him, eyes wide. "You fight like Storm," she said breathlessly. He smiled weakly. "We call it training." The rain poured harder, drowning the smaller fires, but not the great one. The sacred tree burned like a beacon of blue light. The raiders, seeing their attack fail, began to retreat to their ships. The huntresses roared in victory, their chants echoing through the forest. Then above the thunder, a different sound filled the sky. A deep, mechanical hum that didn't belong to the raiders. Aaron looked up. A sleek silver ship broke through the clouds, its engines cutting through the storm. A human rescue vessel. The distress beacon had worked. Aaron's heart leapt. "That's my ship," he shouted. "They found me." The huntresses looked up in awe as the vessel descended, shining bright like a star. But Sarala's expression changed. She looked at him not with joy but with quiet sadness. She already understood what it meant. The humans would come for him, but not for them. Aaron lowered his spear and met her gaze through the rain. "I'll come back," he said. She didn't answer. Instead, she placed her hand over his heart, her fingers trembling. "You bring light," she whispered. "Do not let your people make it war." As the rescue ship touched down, Aaron took one last look at the forest, the glowing trees, the silver-skinned warriors, the faces of those who had called him Fireborn. Then he turned toward the ramp, stepping into the blinding white light. Behind him, the sacred flame burned higher, rising into the clouds like a promise. The storm had ended, but the fire of a new legend had only just begun. The hum of engines filled the air, breaking through the forest silence. The human rescue ship hovered low, scattering dust and glowing leaves with its thrusters. The huntresses watched from the trees, silent shadows with golden eyes, their faces filled with awe and sorrow. To them, the sky had opened and stolen their myth. Aaron Voss stood between two worlds, the gleaming ship that promised home and the alien village that had given him purpose. His uniform was torn, his arm bandaged with alien cloth, his body bruised but alive. He could still feel the warmth of Sarala's hand on his chest and hear her voice in his head. "You bring light. Do not let your people make it war." As the ramp of the rescue ship lowered, a familiar voice echoed through the comms. "Captain Voss, this is Commander Rains. We've been searching for your signal for weeks. Stay where you are, we're bringing you home." Home, he thought, but the word felt strange now. The jungle behind him whispered softly, alive with the pulse of 1,000 unseen eyes. He looked once more at Sarala, who stood near the sacred tree, her silver skin glowing beneath the fading stormlight. The fire still burned behind her, blue and steady like a living heart refusing to die. Rain stepped out of the ship, armored and alert, blaster drawn. His eyes scanned the tree line. "You've got company, Captain?" Aaron raised his hand slowly. "They're not hostiles," he said firmly. "They saved my life," Rains frowned. "They're aliens, Voss. We don't know what they want." "They wanted peace," Aaron said quietly. "And they gave me fire when I had none." Sarala stepped forward, her movements calm but regal. Two of her warriors followed, spears lowered, their glowing tattoos flickering faintly. The human soldiers stiffened, weapons half raised. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Rains glanced at Aaron. "Captain, we can't risk a first contact breach. You know the code. No exchange, no tech, no alliance. We extract and wipe traces." "That's protocol." Aaron felt his jaw tighten. "If you try to wipe traces, you'll burn their home," he said sharply. "And you'll start a war you can't win." Rains hesitated. "You've gone native, Captain," he muttered. "Weeks in the wild and you think they're saints?" Aaron took a step closer. "They called me Fireborn. Not because I was powerful, but because I brought light without destruction. We could learn from them, Rains. They don't fear the unknown. They respect it." Sarala watched their exchange closely, not understanding the words, but feeling the energy between them. She spoke softly in her language, and Aaron turned to translate. "She says the fire unites or destroys depending on who holds it." Rains lowered his weapon slightly. The storm above was clearing, shafts of sunlight breaking through the clouds. For a moment it felt as if the world itself was listening. Aaron took a slow breath. "I'll go with you," he said finally, "but you leave them alone. No samples, no scans, no interference." Rains studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Fine. But you'll have to explain this to the council. I will, Aaron said. And maybe this time we'll tell them a story worth hearing. He turned back to Sarala, who stood still as a statue. He stepped closer, pulling from his pocket a small, cracked metal emblem, his earth insignia. He pressed it into her palm. A symbol of my people, he said. So you'll remember we're not all destroyers. She looked down at the object, her fingers curling around it. Fireborn, she whispered, her voice soft and steady. Sky will call you again. When it does. We will answer, Aaron nodded. Then I'll find you, Sarala. As he stepped onto the ramp, the jungle wind brushed his face, carrying the scent of earth and smoke and life. He looked back one last time. The huntresses stood together, their silver forms glowing in the light. The blue fire of their sacred tree burned behind them, taller and brighter than before, a symbol of rebirth, not fear. The ramp closed. The engines roared. The ship lifted into the sky, leaving behind the forest that had changed everything. From above, the planet looked peaceful, wrapped in swirling clouds and emerald light. But Aaron knew the truth. Beneath that beauty, two worlds had touched, and neither would ever be the same again. In the command seat, Rains broke the silence. So, Captain, what do we call this place? Aaron looked out the window, a faint smile on his lips. Ilaria, he said softly. The world that taught us how to burn without hate. As the ship vanished into the stars, the last flicker of blue fire reflected in Aaron's eyes, a promise that humanity's light, once feared, could someday guide instead of destroy. And deep in the forest, Sarahla raised the earth insignia toward the sky, whispering into the wind, Fireborn, we remember.